351, I'm on scene. I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor, Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service speed advisor on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Welcome back, fans of the Volley Chief podcast. I have a first tonight. This is my Chief. You are my first repeat guest this quick. We'll say back by popular demand. How's that?
That's great. I appreciate that.
So 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Chief Robert Cobb, retired from the Jersey City Fire Department, deputy chief there, and we ended up having we went way off the rails, and we ended up having a conversation about ISO and ISO ratings and how you improve them and what they're looking for, and it was very successful, but we barely scratched the surface. So, Chief, I know that you said you wanted to come back, and we got a lot of feedback from you, a lot of positive feedback. So I know you mentioned that you wanted to start talking about rapid intervention, correct?
Yeah. You want to start from the beginning, or
However you want to do it.
well, let me just. I just want to point out. I don't think I got a chance to really kind of give you my background with ISO. When I left Jersey City after 34 years, I threw my name into the hat. ISO at the time, it's a company under the umbrella of Veris Analytics, and they're headquartered actually in Jersey City. They were in New York City, and they moved to Jersey City in 2001. And they were looking for a new home office director for the community hazard mitigation group. And that's the group that does the gradings for most, back then, probably 80% of the fire departments across the country. There are a couple states that have their own system, but they use the ISO material to do it. They just hire their own representatives. But so anyway, I threw my hat in the ring. I got the job just as I retired from Jersey City, and it was what they were doing was they had a lot of, not a lot, but they had quite a few volunteer firemen and a couple guys that left the career departments early. So they had a kind of a core group, but they never had a leader or the director of the operations come from the fire service. So that they decided, somebody made that decision, and there were 3 or 4 of us in the mix. And I was fortunate, to be their choice. And I met some terrific people there. There were 2 there was a vice president that overlooked what I was doing, Mike Waters. And at the time, he was the chief down in South Jersey, in Jackson Township. So that was helpful, maybe a lot more comfortable. And then there was another gentleman who was, I believe, the assistant vice president at the time. And he had been a career firefighter, came over to ISO way back when. So, we all spoke the lingo. And then the head engineer was Kevin Kuntz, who was the fire chief in one of the New Brunswick, I forget exactly which one, but so he had a long career with the volunteers, and now he's a volunteer in Gettysburg. His son's a fireman in a couple other places. So it made it kind of a comfortable transition that I could speak their language, because I wasn't ready to speak the corporate language. But anyway, they hired me. I was the home office director at their. They had a 20-story high-rise, I think, on Washington Boulevard in Jersey City. Got acclimated there. They gave me a list of things to do to get started, and the rest is kind of history. But about I guess it was about 8 or 9 months after that, I got promoted to national director, and I took over the whole program, not just that program, but there were 2 other programs. They do something called the building code building, it's called BSEGS, a building code effectiveness grading schedule. They do the same thing for building departments, which a lot of people don't know. So, I'll get that out there to any fire chiefs that do a double duty. But they also grade building departments and how close they are to the applicable laws in their state, et cetera. And the better they are, again, it could lead to a savings for homeowners in commercial buildings. So, and then they also ran the National Flood Insurance Program, which was kind of under my umbrella, but they had some real experts in that was dealing with the federal government. But anyway, so and one of the things that they wanted me to do is look into any necessary changes. So coming from the fire service, I'd been on a speaking circuit for years, and I hit almost every state. And I told you I had a training company. I traveled all over the country, so I made a lot of great connections. And it was easy for me to reach out to fire chiefs all over the country, especially the Western fire chiefs. At the time, was being run by Jeff Johnson. If Jeff was in the public sector, he'd be the CEO of some major company. I mean, he was that intelligent. He was a great fire chief and a great leader for the Western Fire Chiefs Association. So I met with him, and I got to. He managed to get representatives from those 10 states. I spoke with them, looked for things that they thought needed to be changed. And the number one thing that came out from almost every fire chief across the country was they were tired of ISO going back years ago, had their own equipment list. They had their own this, their own that. And every fire chief said, why can't we just follow the NFPA? So I was able to do that. Long story made very short. I had some great people on the committees that did that. And we were able to convince ISO to use the NFPA standards as a guide. It's not written word for word into their fire suppression rating schedule, which is their Bible, but that's what they follow. And it made every fire chief across the country really happy. And ISO gained a lot of credibility by doing that, by leaning towards the fire service. So I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud about is that I got most of the fire chiefs on board, and it made it just, a lot easier. So so we did that, and then we started to kind of figure out a way to make the grading system when we came into your community. It used to be a field rep could spend 3 days going over every single detail. And, in this computer-driven world, it was decided that we needed to find a more efficient way. And we did over the years. And now a field rep could come in, collect the data from the fire chief, from the water department, from fire prevention, and really gather all that up without spending 3 or 4 or 5 days, not only of his time, but of the fire chief and his staff's time. I mean, that was another problem we had. Geez, I have to assign guys, and it takes away from my work day, and that was another general complaint. So again, we made it a lot more efficient, and I know it even got more efficient after I left. It's a pretty simple process now, because most of the computer programs that fire chiefs now have in their system, they have an ISO section in it. I had, when I was there, I had meetings with some of the companies. And they wanted to know if it was okay. At first, we weren't going to let them kind of have the ingredients that go into the sauce, but eventually we allowed them to kind of just copy a few things from our schedule. And so it made it a lot easier for fire chiefs now. Whenever they were asked about training or equipment or ladders or fire prevention, how often do you get out, water department, flow tests, et cetera, it made it a lot simpler. So that's where we got to. I was glad to be a part of that. I made a lot of good friends while I was out there. And, I have to tell this little secret, because I've been gone for a long time, but I still have some really good friends. I still meet with Mike Waters, who was a big part of hiring me, and he retired, and Joe Massington, he retired. But when I first went there, they kind of knew my background, but they gave me, kind of a timetable. They wanted to get the word out to the fire service that, this guy from the fire service, Butch Cobb, was now their new national director. And they didn't know how long it was going to take. And I just listened. I didn't say too much at the meetings at the beginning, but three of my really good friends were one, Harvey Eisner, um, for Firehouse Magazine. So that was a pretty easy go-to. Another good friend of mine was Bobby Halter. God rest his soul. I met Bobby when he was a battalion chief in Albuquerque with Harvey, so I got to know him really well. So that was two. And the third one was I went to Billy Goldfeder, and I'm sure everybody that listens to you knows about his secret list, and he
Yep.
he can get the word out. So you know what? I could have just put my feet up on the table on the desk and made 3 phone calls, but I called them and I gave them all the information, and eventually they put that out in their magazines and their websites and whatnot. And the American Fire Service, again, was doubly happy now that somebody from the fire service was overseeing the job to grade fire protection in the community. And I'll say this over and over again: when ISO goes in, they don't grade the fire department alone. When they go in, there's a lot goes into the mix, and it has to do with the fire department, the water department, fire prevention, which is most always part of the fire department. Um, and
I mean, Chief, I can't tell you how much I learned just from our talk last week about ISO. I've already had my one of my deputy inspectors reach out to ISO so that we could schedule a meeting to see how to improve. Thanks to what like you said before, the secret of the sauce. And it really, for a very long time, I always thought it was something, difficult, mysterious. But you really make it sound so easy.
it is. It's easy to do. It's not easy, to garner the points necessary to get a good score or a better score. I mean, you have to put the time and effort into that, and you have to, what, they're looking for you to do what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to have adequate training. You're supposed to have adequate water supply. You're supposed to have the deployment analysis. Can you get the fire trucks and the manpower there in the given time period that the NFPA standard recommends? So it's not, it's not different. If you're doing that, a lot of your work is done. But if you want to get to a better grade, it takes a little bit of work and sometimes a little bit of money. As I explained the last time, when I was helping some of my friends, I broke their gradings, the complete ISO grade, into three categories. One was to spend a little bit of money, and what I meant by that is add a couple hours of training to each shift, or if you're a volunteer firefighter, a volunteer fire chief, add some extra time. Know where you could get time. So many fire departments would do extrication drills. Well, that's covered. That's covered. You use extrication tools to do forcible entry in a building. So that helps with a building fire. And that's what the grading system is all about. It's about fires in a house or a commercial building. They don't count car fires. They don't count brush fires. They don't count the EMS calls. Although what I want to throw in right now, if you have EMS in your fire department, whether you're volunteer or career, try to make sure that the firefighters on that paramedic rig or on that EMS rig, whatever the rig is, are qualified firefighters. Because we went to some fire departments that had 15 firefighters on ambulances around the city. But by union contract, in at least 2 cases by union contract, if you were assigned to EMS, you couldn't do any firefighting. Well, those 15 or 20 firefighters are not included in your staffing for that day, if that makes sense. So
it does, yeah.
Yeah. So most fire departments, especially out west, their EMS people are firefighters. So you can count them. So that's just just a little thing. That people may not, fire chiefs may not think about, but it actually happened in a big city in Washington, D.C. when we first went there. Dennis Rubin was the chief at the time, and that became a complicated issue, but got it worked out. And then there were other fire chiefs called me and said, "Oh, geez, I didn't add them in because I didn't think you would count them." Well, you got to ask that question. There's there's a lot of questions to be answered. And you can simply email a field rep, you can call him. The other thing is ISO, when I left, we started a pretty good website that from what I understand now, everybody really loves. You call them, you have to prove that you're the fire chief in writing, whatever it is.
I just did that.
Okay, and have you gone to it? Did you go to the site?
I have not. No, I had I had to type up a letter that explained that I was the fire chief when I started, and then, as I mentioned earlier, I have one of my deputy inspectors.
Yeah.
So I had to type up a letter that just says that I am the fire chief and I have been since this date, and then I also authorize, my deputy to act on my behalf for the purposes of ISO.
Yeah, and that's good. So the first two things, if you even want to anything to do with ISO, whether you want them to come in again or and I skip a lot around a lot, but once you get graded, they'll come to you and say, "You sure?" And you can say, "Oh, you know what? I need another 2 weeks. I need another month." They'll go ahead and do that. There's no timetable here. I mean, they may say, "Listen, we'd like to get this done, in whatever 4 or 5 days or 3 days." That's with all the paperwork and computer stuff. But they won't. They're not going to pass that along until you tell them that you're done. And there were fire departments that went back and said, "Oh, geez, you know what? I found this or I found that, or the automatic aid is better than I thought." But if I was the fire chief, the first thing I would do is find out who my regional field representative is, and I would call him, make an appointment, let him come in, explain it in a lot more detail and a lot better than I've been gone for a few years. I haven't been there in 10 years, but a little less. But call him or her, and they'll come out and explain the whole thing. I know out west now they do a lot of they're doing a lot of regional seminars, and they're getting 60, 70, 80, 90 people, and a lot of chief officers listening to them because they have updates. So the first thing I would do is find out who my field rep is. The second thing is I get on that website because it's got everything that they know about your community, not just the fire department. Like I said, water and fire prevention and every little and communications, every little detail. So get on that, take a look at it. If you think you want to go to the next highest grade, or if you think, there are departments that have expanded, but haven't been graded in a long time. And I forget how many fire departments there were when I was there. I mean, across the country, it's unbelievable how many there are. I mean, you don't realize once you travel around, especially when you go to some of the rural areas. My goodness. But there's quite a few. So they can't get to everybody every year, obviously. But now they can get to you more often. And if you get to a class 1, they're gonna stop in a little bit more often because that's the top grade. So anyway, there's 3 things I would do. Find out who the field rep is, hook into that website, take a look at that. If there are things on there that have gotten better, call them and tell them you want a field rep, you want to schedule a field rep to come in. You think you could get a better grade? The fire protection's better, your water department's better, it's grown. So there are things the 3 things that I would do, and I'll tell you, it's not painful anymore. and the flip side of that, when I first went there, I mean, I heard this all the time when I traveled around. Oh, the ISO police are coming, because I guess way back when, if you cheated on that and got caught, every state in the country has to have, by federal law, an insurance commissioner, and he oversees this whole thing. When ISO makes any changes in any part of a state, or they have to get a sign off from the insurance commissioner. They don't do anything without the state insurance commissioner, giving the okay. At least that's the way it was. So, but way back when, if somebody reported to the insurance commissioner that these guys cheated, they would call ISO, but they don't do that anymore. They're not the ISO police. They just gather the data. Yeah, they just gather the data. They give it to some very intelligent people to figure out. If you see the formulas that go into this, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. Thank God for computers. And then that's yeah. Go ahead.
You said, Chief, that we were tonight. You wanted to talk a little bit about the rapid intervention program.
Well, that was going way back when. I just we had a couple instances in Jersey City before rapid intervention, I guess, was invented. I mean, we were following New York City. Jersey City was in the shadow of New York City my whole career, and that was a good thing. And they had started the firefighter assist and search team fast. So we did that. We checked with them. We got some data, blah blah blah, and we started that. We started sending a ladder truck, and then I kind of I took my training company, which my training company was all hands on. It was called Fireground Survival LLC. I had some great guys, and we just started a company, and it was all about surviving the fireground. It was about firemen surviving the fireground because, if you go back 25, 30 years, 35 years, I mean, there were, of the 100 firefighters dying every year, there were probably 60 or 70 actually dying inside a burning building. I mean, guys getting lost, getting trapped, and can't find them. So we started a program, and it really caught on. Traveled all over the country, and I'll tell you, one of the amazing things were, I got invited out to California on 2 different occasions. One, there was a fireman, not Sacramento, I forget where it was from, but Jeff Seaton, a real intelligent guy. He invited me out to do my rescue trap firefighter program, and going to California for East Coast guys, the back and forth between
the two, yep.
Yeah, but to get invited out there, it wasn't real scary, but it just, some of them wore different costumes, and we made fun of their helmets a little bit, but all good stuff. And I did my program, and it was a huge hit. And then I met two of the smartest fire chiefs I ever met in my life. Johnny Tripp, and Johnny Tripp was the chief deputy for LA County, huge fire department, and chief deputy is the number 2 guy. And the other guy was Mike. It'll come to me in a second. And he was the deputy chief, but they were on the staff, and they had come to Worcester. I think I mentioned to you, myself and Mickey Conboy, I was Lieutenant Rescue 3 now, but Mickey and I were in the same volley department before he moved to New York, and we stayed friends. And we started one seminar for Worcester when the 6 guys got killed. There was supposed to be one seminar on the weekend, me, him, and we were going to invite Johnny Salker, and I forget who the 4th guy. We were going to do a weekend thing. We were all friends, and I said, listen, let's raise some money for these wives and kids. I don't know, it was like 16 kids, and so we were going to do a weekend thing. And Harvey Eisner, is still working. I say working for Harvey Eisner. It was everybody that worked for him were volunteers, and but. A fascinating story. We were going to do a weekend in the high school, do a little Friday night get together, brotherhood thing, and then Saturday all day, and then Sunday morning have like a little kind of a sit around the coffee table type of thing with the audience and ask them what they thought, what they didn't like, I like doing that. So anyway, Harvey gave us a half page in a magazine. I called Bobby Holton. So the magazines kind of gave me a little bit, and then Billy Goldfeder, of course, and we went from having about 65 people signed up to 250 in a matter but that 250 grew to 500. So we moved it from a high school to a bigger place when it got to 500, and then we moved it from 500, it went to like 750. We moved it to another, and finally we took, they had a big, it looked like Madison Square Garden right in the middle of Worcester. I forget what it was called. But the first day we opened up, we had 1,021 people for a weekend seminar. Can you believe that?
That's pretty good.
I don't know if you'll ever see that again, but it was around Christmas time when the guys got killed, and it was just really heartbreaking. But so we did it, and we had an amazing lineup. All of the superstars back then. I was amazed at and when I called them, I said, listen. And I knew them, from Firehouse Magazine conferences, etc. I said, there's no money in this. You got to get him on your own. You got to eat, no. But we did that, raised a lot of money for the 100% of the money went towards the families. And then the Worcester guys came and said, hey, listen, it was pretty successful. Let's do a second one. Okay. And we did one for each guy. We did 6 years, one for each guy. We started hands-on, which probably double the amount of people that came because they had a vacant hospital. They had like 5 buildings in a vacant hospital. And if I ever showed you some of the pictures, I have one picture when we were doing the getting a guy out of ladder and going. We had like 6 or 7 ladders up to the 3rd floor. Same evolution with like 60 guys coming through windows. It was pretty neat. But anyway, yeah, we did that, and then that's when I met the guys from California, and they said, "Hey, listen, what would it cost to move this out to LA County?" And my first message to them was, "You couldn't afford it," because we weren't going to California on our own dime. I can tell you that. I mean, East Coast firemen are a little frugal, so but they got us out there. We had a big thing in 700-800 people. We did hands-on. Hands-on was pretty cool. And we'll get back to ISO. I think all these things that were funny back then. So we get out there, and I got all these guys that had so much experience. That was the one thing for me. You couldn't join my little gang unless you were well experienced. I wasn't, you had to show me that you had done this for real, for better or for worse, before you come to work with me. So we had a tremendous crew. Back when all these old guys were doing hands-on. I mean, like I said, Johnny Salker, John Norman. We had Philly Endicott before I went to the USAR. He's the head of the USAR team out of Philadelphia. He was a lieutenant in the rescue. Big guys like that. But anyway, so we go out there with all these experienced firefighters and officers. And the first thing that happened is that somebody came and said, "Listen, you can't do any training here unless there's one qualified instructor with a California certificate standing right next to you." And I said, "Well," I said, "all right." I said, "As long as he doesn't interfere what we're going to do, because we're going to do things he probably never saw before." So, we were doing, before the bailout rope came, we were doing bailouts just by wrapping, putting the rope around your waist and using your gloved hand as a descending device. And they weren't too keen on that, but it worked out. But it was kind of funny because, and then some of the firehouses that they let us use out in the suburbs, we had to put mats down on the floor because the floor looked like a kitchen table. So we were afraid we'd scratch it or something. Anyway, so we did that, but that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. We did a lot of travel with my guys all over the country. We were up in Canada. We were everywhere, and then and there was nobody else doing this. I mean, everybody was doing engines and trucks, I guess, but nobody did anything about how do you survive the fire ground. And and you could only use the tools that were in your pocket. If I came to class and I saw you were holding stuff that you didn't usually carry, I tell them to put it on the table, get rid of it. You can only use what's in your pocket, because when it happens, you got what's in your pocket. That's it. You don't have wire cutters. Well, then you're not getting the guy cut out a drop ceiling, or So anyway, so that was fun. It was I headed to retire. We're getting together December 4th every year since 2000. The guys got killed in 99, so 2001, I think. We've gotten together. The core group of my guys get together with the core group from Worcester that put on those 6 seminars. We've gotten together every year except for a COVID year, and we rotated. Like this year, we're going to Orange County. Mickey Conboy, Bobby Athanas, those guys from Rescue 3, they're going to hold it in a restaurant there in a hotel where they live. The following year, we'll go to Jersey City, and then we go back to Worcester. And we've been doing that for, I don't know how many years is that? A long time, really long time.
Yeah.
But we're all retired, except for Mickey Conboy. We're all retired. Mickey's the only one of us that's still working. He was a little bit younger, so he's got a few more years in Rescue 3. But it's a good core group. We still get together. We still tell stories. Stories get better and better, and we have a lot. But that's the brotherhood. I mean, that's really true brotherhood. When you see things like that, and I actually have a class I put together on brotherhood. I always said it. When you join, you're part of the brotherhood, but you're not in the brotherhood. You're part of it, but not in it. To get in it, you got to do something that shows you can prove that you're brother to the guy standing, the girl next to you. So that's my take on that. It's everybody says as soon as you put your hand up and say, I do, or whatever it is when you get sworn in. I'm part of the brotherhood. Oh yeah, you're part of it, but you're not in it.
You know,
Yeah, well, that's, what, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean,
right? It's true.
yeah, yeah. You know what? If I'm crawling down the hallway, if three of us are crawling down the hallway, and one guy decides to stay back and kind of hump the hose, and you know what? You're not doing, the brothers stay together. If your job is to stay together, you stay together. If I'm going to search above the fire and I have a partner, when I stop, he's got to bang into me, or when he stops, I got to bang into him. Prove your worth, and then to me, you're part of the brotherhood. I think we're making it too easy for a lot of guys to be part of the brotherhood, and they're really not, because they're not, they're
Well,
not doing their
it's
thing.
the lack of fires, right? It used to
Yeah,
be,
yeah,
you quickly would be able to prove yourself, and now with the lack of overall fires that we respond to,
yeah,
a lot of people get a free pass kind of longer than you would expect.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, and it's something to overcome. But there's other things too. I mean, you're not just going to fires anymore. You're going to a lot of other things that you count on the person next to you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. And there's things with training. You train. One of the things that really bothered me, and I'll give you an example. When I became a chief in West Milford Township up in northern New Jersey, it was semi-rural. So I joined. I was a fireman. I went up there for a number of years, and I was a lieutenant, captain, all that, and I became the chief. And I set out the drills and whatnot. And I had a couple guys come to me and say, "Geez, you know what? We thought when you were chief, we learned all these new things, and we thought, you give us a lot more better information than we had." And I said, I thought back to them, and I had a little meeting with some of the officers, and I said, you know what? Everybody wants to learn new things. Some of the guys here can't do basic things. I've seen them have trouble getting a Mattingdale into a house. I've seen them have trouble getting a ladder up. I've seen it, things like that. I said, get out of the firehouse quicker. Let's learn all the basics. So I always, even in Jersey City, I was like that. We did the basics all the time.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
I tell
yeah,
my guys all the time, I want the basics down pat. I want stretching
yeah.
lines, throwing ladders,
Yep.
and
Yep.
and doing searches, doing that basic stuff. And it's a thing nowadays too. There's a lot of factors, right? The internet, you can go online, you could buy fancy new tools, you could,
Yeah. Yeah.
you could go do, but at the end of the day, if you can't stretch a line, if you don't, I could watch you, masking up and going in and kind of know how it's going to go, just by that. And it really, like you said, a firefighter knows another firefighter within 30 seconds. And I don't
Oh
mean,
yeah. Yep.
like you said, I don't mean, when I went to the academy, we had a lieutenant from New York, Dave Russell, and he would say, you're either on the job or in the job. And
Yeah.
those were your choices,
Yeah.
and it's the truth. And they were, again, you don't hear that a lot nowadays. It's a lot more, I don't want to say it's a lot more watered down, but it is the truth. You want to be, and especially I feel like too, when you come from a more, either a busier department, an urban area, or you're on like a specialized unit, you kind of stay together with that group.
Yeah. Yeah. I often said that there were times when I thought it was harder being an officer or a chief in a volunteer department than it was in the career department. And I'll tell you why. I mean, and it's right in front of you. When I'm in my career department and I was an Engine 20, it was all the same guys coming in on the same days, all training together, doing everything together. So I knew their strengths, I knew their weaknesses, and I don't mean by weaknesses that they couldn't do something, but I knew, for example, a guy, could take a bigger bundle of hose, or a guy could get up the stairs faster, or when I went to the truck, the 5 truck, I knew the guys, what they could do and what they could do better. And I don't want to say worse, but what they could do better. We had a guy, Lenny Rubicki. His nickname on the fire ground with Lenny the saw. Lenny could do things with saws on the roof that amazed guys. Would stand back and say, "What the hell?" And the other thing that Lenny could do, if the saw didn't work, Lenny could get it working in about 15 seconds because he knew every little piece of that saw. So that was his nickname. But so I knew, some guy said to me, "Oh, you should rotate him." No, I didn't rotate him. Whatever they could do best at that fire at that particular moment is what they were going to do.
Right. You got to play to their strengths.
Yeah, Pete Greasy could force entry into anything. So he took the irons. I mean, we all knew each other. Now I go to the volunteers, and when I was in Dumont, we had some great firemen. We had young kids coming up. I think I mentioned this. I became chief because the World War II guys, the older guys, including my dad, he was the chief for a while. They were kind of phasing out. They were going more to the. I used to get in trouble all the time with them. I'd say, you guys, these older guys, I said, you sit back there, you have a couple beers, and all you do is knock the crap out of what we're doing or what we did. I said, how about helping them? But that was them, and it was good. But I had a new group, the group that got me. I got into being chief in Dumont by the skin of my teeth, because they were looking. It was enough young guys that they were looking for, more of the training, more following the rules, and that's what we did. And they were a great guy, but there were day fires where I would show up and I would look, who's doing what. It just sometimes you had to play to that. You had to play to that. I mean, you want these guys doing the backup line, or you don't want them? You want them going to the floor above right away? There were certain times where you had to play to the crowd. You had to know who was in that crowd. And I know I have other volunteer chiefs saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous. If they can't all do the same thing." Well, simple fact is, all volunteer firemen, you just don't know. You're not drilling them with them every day. I mean, once a week we got together. We'd have, Dumont, maybe we had 3 or 4 good house fires in a year. So you really didn't know. So I paid attention to who was there. And there were times when, like any day crew, I was worried, but I was worried about them.
Well, I've said before, because I said, look, when I came into work every day, I had a riding list. I knew exactly who was on what company. I said, when you're seeing whose trunk is popped or whose sneakers are on the ground, pulling up to a scene as a volunteer chief, it's a big difference. And you're thinking in your mind as you're going to a call, is this guy around? Is that guy working? Who's away? And when again, you're counting trunks popped and sneakers on the ground versus looking at a riding list. It is a completely different mindset and world.
Yeah, it is. And I was fortunate in Dumont. Everybody, for the most part, most of the guys, I'm not going to use the word aggressive. I mean, a lot of these guys were coming up. They were going to different seminars, going to conferences. And Dumont wasn't too far from New York City. We had the same gear, the same helmet, same everything. Dumont was an all Mac town for a while, until Mac went out of business. But it was just, that's the way it was. And these guys were good. They loved to drill. Not only on drill night, I'd get a call from when I was a captain of Engine 1. I get a call from the lieutenant. "Hey, I'm taking 4 or 5 guys out. We're gonna do this. Go. You know what? Don't even ask. Just I'll hear on the radio." There were guys that just wanted to go out more. They wanted to do more. They wanted to learn more. I got the budget kicked up a little bit so we could send firefighters to different things in the state or even out of state. I thought that was important to get the views from other communities, and so it all worked out well. It turned out well, and I hated to move, but couldn't afford a house down in that part of Bergen County, New Jersey. So when we had my first kid, I was living in an apartment at the time. This is kind of a funny story. We had juniors back then. Each company had about 6 or 7 junior firemen, and these kids were good. Back then you had to be 21 to be a fireman. By the way, that's why I went into the Army. And when I got out of high school, I was 18, but I didn't even think about the fire service because you had to be 21 to vote back then. And this is like 1967, and I went in the Army. I figured, I got to do something. I wasn't going to college. I said college is like so far down the road for me. I couldn't stand going to school anymore. So I went in the Army. I figured that was a good thing. It was only in the middle of the the worst couple of years in Vietnam, but you know, it would be a good test, I guess. But I went in the Army, and when I came back, I was 21, and I had in New Jersey gave combat veterans absolute preference on a test. I think I mentioned this. It doesn't matter what grade you got, a 70, 71, 72, you went to the top of the list. And that was kind of neat. There were a lot of veterans took the test. So amongst the veterans, we were graded. But I was I think there was 70, almost 70 firefighters, 70 kids in my probie class, and I probably 60 of them were Vietnam veterans. But yeah, so yeah, I just bided my time. But I started with the volleys, and it was, even working with the older guys. I'll tell you, I saw fires. I can remember to this day, basement fires in stores with these guys, these older guys at the time. Most of them were World War II vets, sneaking down the cellar steps, and I just, I would just stand there like, you gotta be kidding me. Why would they be doing that? But they were good. They battled. They went in there, and I know there wasn't all the chemicals and all that crap that everybody says, but they went in there and did their job. They had those 60-pound steel bottles on their back, and it was just I couldn't wait. So it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. So we it was just it was in the cause. But so like I said, I moved to West Milford, and that was the story about that. I just we went to a fire. They had a CYO camp up there, a lot of wooden buildings, and we got one of the buildings that was pretty well off, and we pulled up, and the first engine out during the day was a Mack R model with a 3,500-gallon tank and jump seats, specially made. Had jump seats. I still got a picture of it, and that was the first. We didn't take the smaller engine. We had a 1250 E1, I think. But during the day, you had to take some water with you because we didn't know if anybody would take the tanker. So anyway, we get there, and we pull the line off. I was the assistant chief, but I was going at least to the doorway because we didn't have enough guys. And the thing was going pretty good. I called for the line to be charged, no water. Call for the line to be charged, no water. Now I told the next crew, get a 2.5 as the backup because it was a big wooden building. And it wasn't occupied, it was all storage. Well, you know what, I shouldn't say that. The building's not unoccupied until you go in. This is one of my big every seminar I say this. The building's not vacant, the building's not unoccupied until you go in there and look and decide there's nobody in there. You know what, I hate it when they say, oh, don't go in there, it's a vacant building. The first two people that I actually saved in Jersey City, the homeless people and 2 vacant buildings. And there was no such thing as unoccupied building. It was a vacant building that we had to go search, because there could be. So, but anyway, getting back to this, we get no water. I go back, and the guy at the pump panel, older guy, but he didn't know too much about the tanker. And he said, I'm not sure what to do. I don't know what, blah, blah, blah. So, I said, just relax. You got it in pump. I said, okay, pull this handle. All right. Tank to drop, tank to pump, and I said, just crank the throttle up. I said, I'll tell you, I couldn't get into how many pounds yet because but you know what? That kind of disturbed me. That
I can see why I would.
Yeah, it got water, and we got in, and a couple of sister companies came, and it just we knocked it down. But you know what? It was his first time at that pump panel, and again, back to training. Spend some extra hours at the pump panel and telling everybody this is what this does. We just take it for granted, because you go from an E1 to a Mack, this big giant fire truck with a Jake brake in it, and just all basic stuff. You know what, if I became a fire chief, that's what I would do today. I would go back to basics until I was sure that everybody could do all the things that you need to get in and put a fire on and rescue people. I'm just it was in my DNA, and I stuck with that all the way through, and it served me well. I was unbelievably lucky wherever I went. I had good groups of guys that kind of rotated to me. We all worked as fine. Yeah, and you know what? I just we had one guy that didn't fit, and without saying a name, but when I was in Jersey City, we had a bidding system where you had a bid sheet would come out in September, and all the openings would be listed, and you could bid for a spot, and you get a point for every year you're on a job. So it's kind of seniority based. So we had this guy with a little bit of time on a job. He came. I was down the south end of the city. Had a great crew. had an opening, and typically you would call if you were going to bid someplace, you would call the captain and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about bidding to engine 19," and you would. It was just if you wanted this guy, say, yeah, come on down, we'd enjoy it. But it was some guy that was looking to go to a busy company so he could have the patch on his jacket and wasn't going to do the work. He would say, you know what, I got somebody else in mind. Now, he could override that because the bidding system was the bidding system, But so I had this guy come and he didn't call anybody. He just bid, and he came down and he was a nothing. And, we had a hard time. And it'd be difficult for me to move him out unless he made a mistake. But it's hard to pick a mistake out when you're all inside a building. I don't know if.
Right.
So what they did was after he got into the company, when September came up, almost a year later, they scotch taped bid sheets to his locker every day. And every day he would complain. And every day I'd say, geez, you know what? I'll look into it. But he got the hit and he scared. I think we scared him a little bit too because, the guys were going above and beyond. But yeah.
So Chief, I'm coming up on our time limit here tonight.
Oh God, no!
I know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask.
FD1's back in service. Command's terminated.